Hi, welcome to Talking Academia. Today I'm here with Kaamya and we're going to be learning a little bit about her life at Cambridge and also her research, and I think it'll be pretty interesting. So thanks for watching. Hi Kaamya.
Hi.
How's it going?
Pretty good.
Yeah?
Yeah.
So, Cambridge. How do you feel about it? Give me what word comes to mind when you think of your experience at Cambridge so far?
Bop.
Bop.
Yeah. I think that's
Okay.
really on top, like, number one in my mind right now, because we just had a good one at Wilson yesterday.
Oh, very nice. So, explain what a bop is.
At Cambridge, BOP is a weird acronym for a big organized party, which I recently learned.
It's organized. I thought it was open.
I heard it's organized.
Uh-huh.
It could be different. I don't know.
As opposed to just like a party that just happens.
Yeah.
Like, this is like, it was
It's like planned by the
in
college.
advance. Uh-huh.
Which is cool because they like put effort into like getting DJs and stuff.
That's true. That is very cool.
And it's cool because I feel like BOPs are totally different between the colleges too.
And so you're at which college?
Wolfson.
Wolfson. Okay.
Yeah.
And what is the nature of life at Wolfson? How is the community?
It's a grad college or a mature college, so there's some undergrads there, but everyone's over 21. It's kind of interesting. Everyone that I live with is a grad student. We're all doing different research projects and different faculties, so it's pretty cool. There's some families that live there too.
That's
Some of the
very
older
cool.
students like have children.
Yeah. Okay, so can you explain to me very quickly like how Cambridge's college system works? So like you're at one college, but like roughly how many are there, and like does it have to do with your program? Explain.
So there's 31 colleges, and they all have different sizes, different amounts of funding, and different faculty members associated with them. But you can preference two colleges when you apply to the university. And people usually decide at the graduate level based on availability of like funding for fieldwork or funding for research, and sometimes like personal preferences. Obviously there's like colleges that are closer to the center of town, and did not know that till I came here.
Are you a little far away from...
Yeah, I'm a little far away, but it's been cool because I have been biking so much this year, and I don't think that at any other point in my life I'll be biking this much.
Yeah.
That's been really fun, especially on sunny days when you're riding through the streets. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, Cambridge is cool because it seems like really the primary mode of transport is bike, which is not the case for like
Anywhere
most
else.
places.
Yeah, Amsterdam.
Yeah, that's true. Very cool. So you're enjoying your time at Cambridge right now?
Yeah.
Okay, that's great. And you're here on what course?
I'm doing MPhil Music Studies, which is a really broad course in the music department that has several tracks. So you can do a performance option, or musicology, which is kind of the study of history and cultural context in which music arises. There's a composition track, and then mine is the Center for Music and Science. So it's actually kind of interdisciplinary between psychology and music. And other people study like more computational music. But I am more on the psychology side, and my background is in neuroscience for my undergrad. So that's how I like kind of got in there.
Very cool. Okay, so you say your background is more on the psychology side, but I happen to know that you also have a very big background, maybe less formal, but also pretty formal in music, yeah?
Yeah. So I minored in classical performance in college, classical vocal performance. So I sing mostly like opera and other like, French and German styles. And I studied some theory, but I never really like engaged with musicology before coming here. So it was like pretty new for me.
Wow.
Yeah.
Has that been a hard transition? How's it going so far?
Yeah, it's really hard. I've never taken as many humanities classes in my life as I have here. So it's been like overwhelming to keep up with readings, but also really interesting and totally new for me.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's hear a little bit of background on your history with music. So when did you start singing? Why did you start singing?
I started singing when I was really little because my parents, basically everyone from my parents' part of India is like super into South Indian classical singing called Carnatic music. They're from Chennai, which is like the southernmost part of India. And there's a huge Carnatic music festival there every year, and everyone sings and everyone goes to listen to it. So my parents are super into Carnatic music, and they put me in classes for that when I was like 3. So I started singing that way, and then when I went to school, I sang in choirs. And eventually one of my choir directors thought that it would be great if I started doing some solo singing. And I started taking voice lessons for Western classical singing, which definitely met with some resistance in my family, because you can't really sing both well, Carnatic music and Western classical music. So there's a little bit of tension there, and I still did Carnatic music, but I think that there's a noticeable change in like technique when I started doing more opera and solo singing.
So tell me a little bit more about Carnatic music, because I don't know very much about it at all. Like what vocally does it require that's so different from opera?
It uses mostly your chest voice, which is the same part of voice that most pop singers use, but and it's also like highly improvisational in ways that I don't think opera is as much. It's like kind of like improv on the level of like jazz, like experimental jazz, and large portions of Carnatic music concerts are improv.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you're singing improv. And by yourself or with a group, or?
Usually you're accompanied by a drum called a mridangam, which is like played on the sides, kind of. And you can have a Carnatic violin, a flute, which is like a wooden flute. And a veena, which kind of looks like a sitar, if you've ever seen that.
Yeah.
It has like the bulbs, and you play it like long ways, it's a stringed instrument.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So is everyone improvising with one another, or are you just improvising and then everyone's responding to you, or how does that work?
It starts out like pretty separated, so the vocalist would do a section of improv, and all of the improv is like constrained within the raga that you're in, which is kind of like the scale that you're working in, but it's a little more complicated than a scale. But you can't deviate from the tones that are in that scale. Those are the only things you're allowed to use. But also there's like a lot of sliding. It's not as like, on the note as Western classical music is. Which makes it like, the possibilities kind of like endless. Because you can get really different qualities by sliding between notes than you can by just like using every single note in the scale. Sliding between notes meaning? Like you link them in a kind of like loopy way. It's not just like a da da, it'd be like da da. Yeah. Very cool. So did you learn this stuff formally at all, or you just kind of like went to concerts and stuff like that? And then... I had a teacher, and I learned most of it when I was doing like my first Carnatic recital, which is called a kacheri, which was in like 9th grade. And that's the first time I had to do like a lot of the improv sections, because until then you kind of learn songs and like learn how to do the improv, but there's like a lot of formal training you have to go through first. Very cool. There's like a whole music school in Chennai that like makes books full of like stuff that you have to learn before you can get to that part. Yeah. Wow. Kind of like Suzuki. Yeah. Very cool. And so you were how old when you did the transition from Carnatic to opera? I was in 7th grade, because you can't start singing opera until kind of like your voice matures. So if you like do it too early, then you can like learn really bad technique that'll like damage your vocal cords while you're going through puberty. Wow. Yeah. So you have to be done with puberty by the time you're starting this kind of stuff. Yeah, or like I think that most people start when they're 12 or 13, and then especially for boys, like it's good to wait until your voice breaks, because then your technique totally changes. Yeah. So when people say like boys' voices break, is that an actual thing? Like there's like some kind of I don't actually know the physiology behind it. I think your like vocal tract changes during puberty. So like the breaking part is that your voice literally drops like an octave. Right. Yeah. Which doesn't happen with girls? No. I mean, our voices do get lower. Like noticeably lower, but it's just nothing compared not to that sharp of a degree. Very interesting. Okay, so what was it like starting opera? Really exciting, because my school was weird and had like a lot of support for solo classical singing. I went to like a public high school in New Jersey, but we had a really strong arts program with a lot of focus on the orchestra and choir.
Mm-hmm.
And in the choir, since we sang like mostly classical music, all of the solos, the people that would get the solos all studied like classical solo singing.
Mm-hmm.
And then we used to also have like divisions of some of our choral festivals where you could compete for classical singing. So it was like a big deal if like you could do that. And it's weird because here the two are extremely separate. I've realized that like it doesn't make that much sense that people from choirs like start learning to sing opera in my high school as much as I thought it did.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense if those two were like linked your entire life, but in my head those are very separate, but I also know very little about like singing and music overall. So.
Yeah. I think I only learned like in college how different they are because you have to use like much more straight tone singing, especially for like English choral singing, which happens in chapels, right? It's like very straight tone, like pure, so that it carries well in like the arches of the chapel. But for opera, like obviously it's like you use a lot of vibrato and you have to project in a very different way because they're not mic'd and you can hear them in like those huge halls. So it's really amazing that single people can produce that much sound.
Yeah, like you.
Yeah.
So single tone, or straight tone.
Straight tone.
So that's in contrast to vibrato, meaning you're not doing this with your voice, right?
You are doing that.
You are doing this in vibrato.
Yeah.
Okay, got it. I want to hear a little bit more about the singing competitions that you went to because that's got to be a story.
Yeah, I mean, I used to do like solo singing competitions all the time. Like New Jersey's really weird. I can't believe there's such a big scene for this, but there really is. I guess since we're close to New York, it's probably even crazier in New York.
I don't know.
It is.
Okay, you can tell me.
But there's like New Jersey Music Teachers Association, like North American Teachers of Singing. They all hold like competitions where there's like a regional, state level, like Eastern Seaboard, and like national. And like the highest I ever got was like I got second for the Eastern once. I never made it to the national.
Congrats! But, like, that's second in Eastern is pretty good.
Yeah. But it was cool. Like you get to learn so much, and you have to learn so many different languages to do it. I don't actually like know French or German, but I did take time to like learn Italian because of how much it helps with like learning opera.
Wow.
Because you can't really like emote during opera unless you know what the text is. Yeah, so like for most competitions, like the comments will always be like, doesn't really seem like you know what this word means. You know, the judges can be so brutal. I went to one, so the biggest one is like senior year, like they pick several soloists from the choir to compete in the solo division of like our biggest choral competition. And one of the judges was one of the music directors at Harvard. And he was so mean to me. He said in my comments, like on the spot, like to my face in front of my whole choir, like, you shouldn't be singing that. That's for someone much older than you, and your technique is all wrong. Like, your jaw is out. And then I, like, started crying in front of my choir. It was bad.
Of course you did. That's evil.
I know. It's so rude. And it was also, like, extremely different from everyone else's comments. Because everyone else gave me, like, 95 plus, you know, out of 100. Yeah. He gave me an 86. And that's a huge difference. Like, based on the ranges they really score in. It was crazy.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah, the people can be brutal to like 16-year-olds.
So they're rating you out of 100.
Yeah.
Publicly in front of everyone.
You get the score sheets later, but like the comments are public because it's supposed to be like a workshop. So lots of competitions are like that. Where the judges will like speak to you and try to correct it after. And the worst part is that after they give you comments, you have to keep singing. So you really want to keep it together. I didn't cry until like the very end, but like tears did appear.
I guess that would only be helpful if you're singing like a really sad song and then you can get into it and be devastated. I wanted to ask, like, do you ever feel singing opera that you're doing like a bit of acting to some degree? Because obviously lots of operas are in full operas, like not in isolated songs or anything like that.
I didn't do any full productions into college, but I had a music department that funded a lot of like full-scale productions. I even got to work with, there's this guy named Tom Guthrie who works at the Royal Opera House, and he was a visiting lecturer at my undergrad last year, and we put on a show that he produced. So it was really cool. So in that context, of course, you have to act because it's in the context of the whole story, not just an individual aria. But there's actually rules about like how much acting is expected of you when you're singing an aria with a piano or with an orchestra versus like singing an aria in a staged scene. And the basic rule is that if you're singing with an orchestra or piano, you don't need to act that much because you're not expected to move around as much, and that's kind of part of the acting.
Okay. Very interesting. I had no idea you were in full-scale production. So, do you prefer that to singing just arias?
I think I'm a pretty bad actress, personally, so I don't love that, but it definitely challenges you to, like, be a real performer and not just, like, focus on technique all the time.
I just can't imagine how difficult that must be to, like, be doing this very taxing, powerful thing with your voice while also trying to be someone else. Like, that's too big.
Well, the two go hand in hand. You can't really like achieve the sound without like being emotionally in tune with it. I think the hard part is moving around though.
Just like physically getting from one place to another.
Yeah, and like breathing and not like losing support because that's the first thing to go when you're like nervous or like exhausted, and then you can't sing. So.
Wow, very cool. So. Okay, opera began in 7th grade, you said, and have been doing it pretty consistently ever since.
Yeah.
Very cool. What is singing like at Cambridge? Are you in a choir or? Yeah,
so I sing in a couple of choirs. The main one that I'm in is the mixed choir in King's Chapel, which is called King's Voices. And we sing the Monday Evensong there every week, which is really, Evensong is like really specific to England because it's like an Anglican church tradition that is half an hour, 45-minute long service that's focused on singing. So even the, to an extent, like the prayers and things that the priest said, or I don't think it's a priest, minister, someone, the religious guy, says are in, like, set on a specific note. So they're never just, like, spoken. And the format is always the same. So we always sing, like, a psalm and Magnificat and Nunc Dimittis, I don't know. And the settings change every week. So the texts are just set to different music.
The settings change every week?
Yeah, so, like, the music is different, even though...
Is that common in choral singing, that you have the same text and just apply it differently?
No, I think it's, like, really unique to hear. And it was fun for, like, a term, but now I'm kind of, like, ready for some new words, you know?
So you truly have the same words every week. And you just have to learn the new melody?
Yeah.
Okay, music, yeah. That's the...
It feels like we're sight reading all the time, though. Because we have, like, one rehearsal before the evensong, and then we're singing it.
That's hard.
Yeah.
Well, for me, but presumably...
It's hard for everyone.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you can sight read perfectly at this point, more or less, yeah?
Yeah.
Wow. Do you have perfect pitch?
No, so perfect pitch is, like... There's two kinds of perfect pitch. There's absolute pitch, which is when your brain, like, actually categorizes pitches differently than other people do. Where it associates labels with specific pitches. So you can hear a note and be like, oh, that's a C sharp. And that's extremely rare. There's another kind of perfect pitch that's relative perfect pitch where you kind of memorize one note and then can relate everything else to it. And that can still be pretty quick, so it would appear that you have perfect pitch. But that's, like, a little easier to cultivate, especially if you have, like, orchestral training when you're young, because you always tune to an A. Like, the violins always get tuned to A.
Okay.
So you can memorize A and then know everything else around it. So I think I have, like, really good relative pitch. I definitely don't have perfect pitch.
Wow.
Yeah.
Is it something innate? You can't pick it up?
Some people think that you can train, like, at least perfect relative pitch. Yeah. And I think that makes sense.
Yeah. Wow. Very cool. Okay, so choirs at Cambridge, do you attend other shows often, or are you just doing your own things? Well, okay, sorry, no, you have Evensong, and then you do other choirs as well.
Yeah, so I sang in Wolfson's College Choir, which is kind of more of a community choir, because we have faculty members that join it. So, like, the older members of the community are in it. And it's great to sing with them because they're like so into it. Someone in our choir just sent out an email. There was a flyer for his birthday recital because all he wants for his birthday is for people to come watch him sing. Just him for half an hour. Which is amazing.
It's not the whole group. It's literally
it's a solo
come
recital.
Watch me sing.
Yeah.
For my birthday.
Yeah, which is kind of amazing. I can totally see myself doing that.
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah, they're really into it, but they're not as like trained as people in like any of the chapel choirs would be. And I'm a choral scholar there, so they give me funding for like voice lessons. So I take like solo voice lessons.
Wow.
And I get to sing like all the solos in the choir there and stuff.
Wow.
Yeah, it's like it's pretty nice that I still have voice lessons because I wasn't sure I would get them here.
How's your teacher?
She's good. She's the person that directs like the Emma's program, which is the Masters of Music.
Okay.
So all of the vocalists work with her, and she's like really good, I think.
That's very cool. It's very cool. So you have the Wilson Choir, you have the Evensong at King's. And
I also sing in the University Chamber Choir. But that is like a project-based thing. Like I'll sign on for projects that I want to do, and yeah, that audition was rough though. I think that here. Choral singers learn like much more theory than I am used to.
As part of the audition process, did you have to take any form of tests or?
Yeah. Like... Oh no, not tests, but just like in the auditions themselves, there's a lot of like really complex sight reading where like the keys change like every bar, and yeah, the way I sight read is kind of relative, so it's hard to adapt to like constantly changing keys.
Yeah. Sounds hard. Sounds really hard.
Or they'll like play a sequence of notes on the piano while I'm turned around and ask me to repeat it back, which is like usually pretty easy. But they'll be like the weirdest intervals. And then what's worse is that here they'll literally be like, okay, what notes were those? And I'll be like, oh, actually I don't have perfect pitch. Because here it's extremely common to have perfect pitch because everyone starts singing as choristers in choirs when they're like 5 years old. And they sing like 20 hours a week and they just have perfect pitch. So I was like, I'm so sorry, I don't have perfect pitch. So they gave me the first note. They were like, the first note was B flat. Now tell me what all the other notes were.
But that's
and
extremely
it still took
hard
me like
too.
10 minutes.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
It's intense. Yeah, they're intense.
That's intense. I mean, it makes sense kind of Cambridge having their chorus be very, very particular about, I don't know, it fits in with the image, at least in my head.
Yeah.
And I do see young, like 6-7-year-old boys running around singing music all the time, which is really, really cute and fun. Yeah,
I'm actually singing in concert with the boy choir today. And
really?
They're so fun. We recorded an album with them earlier this year, and the boy sopranos were sitting next to me. And obviously the boy sopranos are like the stars of the choir. Because they have all the high solos. And they have beautiful voices, but they're also such divas.
Really?
They're so funny, and they are so mean to each other when they get notes wrong. They're like, Philip, like, that's not what you should be singing. Pay attention. Yeah.
That's so funny. Do you interact with them, or are you guys
Yeah, we're
like,
friends.
That's so...
They're really excited that I'm American because they're going on choir tour to America, to New York, like, in Easter break. And one of the kids was telling me that he's really scared that he's gonna get mugged. I was like, I think you're gonna be fine.
That's so funny. Wow.
They're so interesting, but also I wonder what's gonna happen with them when their voices break. Because they're so used to, like, being prized for their ability to sing these high notes. Although I know a couple of guys, since my choir director at Princeton was also a Cambridge alum. He like sang in the Trinity Choir. He recruits like a lot of British choral singers to come to Princeton. So I've met quite a few people that like spent their lives being boy choir, like choristers. And they still have beautiful voices. They just sing in a different range now. So I think that as long as you're coaching through the transition. So
it's not necessarily like certain sports where like once you're of a certain size, like you're done. Okay, that's good. Yeah, it's a lifetime like activity. That's so great. Okay, so Cambridge Choral Choir. I feel like now I have a good sense of like the scene.
Yeah.
So you're studying this degree that you said half music, half psychology.
Yeah.
So music background, I understand. Psychology background. You said you did neuroscience in undergrad.
Yeah.
Okay.
So neuroscience is like pretty integrated with psychology. I think that there's like some more elements to neuroscience that aren't in psychology, like neuroimaging. but the two are like much more integrated than people might think that they are.
Uh-huh.
And my undergraduate major was in neuroscience, so that's different from here because it doesn't mean I just studied neuroscience.
Right.
Whereas here you kind of like focus on just whatever course you're here to do. I still took like a lot of, literature, Italian, like evolutionary bio.
So did Italian start in college?
Yeah.
Very cool.
But yeah, so my focus was on neuroscience, and I started out doing mostly neurobiology because I'm pre-med, so like biology is like really interesting to me. I love that, but then I started working in more like social and behavioral neuroscience, like behavioral evolution.
Mm-hmm.
I worked in a marmoset lab, which is a Brazilian primate that's kind of like this big, and they're really interesting to neuroscientists because they're extremely vocal, and the way that they develop vocally is comparable in some ways to human infants.
Huh.
Because they kind of like learn through contingent interactions with their parents. And they're also extremely social, which is a little bit rare for primates.
Interesting. Did you ever interact with these primates when you were doing your research, or was this all... Really?
Mm-hmm. They live in the Neuroscience Institute in Princeton.
That is so fun.
They like live on floor 2, and they have like a team of staff taking care of them. And we like feed them grapes. Sometimes we would just go in and feed them grapes because we need them to like us and like recognize us.
You needed to like establish a rapport with the marmosets before.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Wow. And so what kind of, were you doing research then in that lab?
Yeah, so my thesis was in that lab. And it started out looking at how, at that contingent vocal development.
Mm-hmm.
But I really wanted to do a neuroscience and music study because junior year I randomly like started reading about it. I got placed in like a seminar that was on neuroscience and music.
Uh-huh.
And I was so interested, so I asked my thesis advisor if I could do that. And at first he said that probably wouldn't be possible within his lab. But then my study couldn't happen in its form that I proposed because we didn't have any baby monkeys. Like, the marmosets were not breeding. I spent the whole summer, like, waiting for them to breed.
Yeah.
Or mate. And they didn't. So then my project changed direction, and I looked at how marmosets could perceive tempo changes in music. Which only makes sense because one of the major hypotheses for, like, why music evolved, because all human societies value music in some way, even if it might not be music that we in America or the UK recognize as music. So if it's so universal, then why did it come to be evolutionarily is like a major question. And one hypothesis is that it's a way to promote group social cohesion. So it's then only like important to social species. So since marmosets are like pro-social, it'd be interesting to see if they react in similar ways to tempo changes, which in humans cause like changes in the stress response and like measurable physiological changes in heart rate. So I measured their heart rate in response to different, the Pachelbel canon, the wedding march.
I don't know what that is, but...
Da, 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 da.
Don't know.
Like when you walked down the aisle. Anyway.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, I played them that, but in a really high pitch range because they have different like hearing range than humans do.
And were you singing this, or were you?
No,
just
I
played
recorded
it? Okay.
like one of those like music score playback things, and I played it to them at different like tempos and variable or non-variable, and yeah, they like exhibited some similar heart rate changes to humans in response to those tempo changes.
Wow.
Yeah, even on the scale of like in the variable stimuli, so if you have like lots of notes in a bar, like lots of short notes in a bar, their heart rate can change on like a pretty short time scale to that transient change compared to the parts of the music that have like more whole notes or like fewer notes per measure.
And so this is a phenomenon in humans too that I was just completely unaware of. So
yeah.
in response to different tempos, our heartbeats rise.
So for humans,
tempos.
it's a little bit more complicated than that.
Okay.
Because our behavioral preferences for music and our physiological responses to music aren't always tied. So for the marmosets prefer slow tempos, and their heart rate. Or like, yeah, so marmosets' preferences for music is also like the same as, it's always in the same direction as the change to their heart rate. But for us, sometimes we prefer music that's more upbeat and increases our heart rate, and sometimes we prefer music that regulates or like lowers our heart rate or affects our heart rate variability. And those preferences are tied to like probably uniquely human motivations for listening to music. So we wouldn't see that in marmosets because they don't listen to Paco Balkan for fun.
Right. Wow, this is so interesting. I'm so happy to hear about this. Okay, so tell me a little bit more about your research at Cambridge right now. So I feel like we have all these elements that are like now adding up to this big moment.
Yeah.
Which is?
So my thesis here studies how infant-directed singing, so lullabies and play songs, can help modulate caregiver stress and affect mother-infant communication styles. So there's two parts. So the caregiver stress part is because we've looked a lot at how lullaby singing is beneficial to infants. There's like a lot of research on how music in general is really important for like language acquisition, emotional regulation in infants. But there's also like probably value for mothers themselves or caregivers in singing to their infants, especially early postpartum when the stress of motherhood is like really new and therefore like probably felt to a greater degree. So people are exploring how music programs can help women with postnatal depression. And even in cases where you don't have the diagnosis of postnatal depression, you can exhibit some of the symptoms. And specifically, I'm looking at how this kind of singing can help modulate stress in immigrant mothers who may have higher rates of postnatal depression just because of the accumulation of both cultural stressors and the stressors of motherhood when you're thinking about like living in a new country and potentially having less social support. Although like I recognize that immigrants are not like a homogenous group, and even the people that have been participating in my study have like really different backgrounds. So also obviously that varies by, if you're a student here, you might have different kinds of support, even if you're a parent, like a student parent, than if you are like working in the town of Cambridge.
Right.
Don't have those resources.
Wow. That is a very, very unique topic. I feel like I would never consider something like that, but I should. That's super interesting. So how did you come up with this idea? This sounds like a very particular thing.
Yeah.
Was it given to you, or were you like,
No.
I know what I want to do?
Yeah, I proposed it when I applied because basically when my Princeton advisor said I couldn't originally do a neuroscience and music thesis, I spent half of my summer doing music because I didn't think I would ever like have funding again to work with music programs.
Right.
So Princeton gave me some funding to work with the Weill Music Institute at Carnegie Hall, which is Carnegie Hall's education wing. They do like lots of social impact work in New York and the Bronx and a lot of like under-resourced areas. And I worked with the Lullaby Project, which is their program that pairs women from under-resourced areas with teaching artists while they're either pregnant or have just had their baby, and they write customized lullabies for their babies by working with a teaching artist.
So
and there's
cool.
lots of like really famous musicians associated with the project, like Joyce DiDonato, who's like a famous opera singer.
Okay.
Works with them and like comes to the concert every year to sing some of the lullabies. And it's really cool that they do this in settings including like Rikers Island, which is a prison complex. They work with incarcerated women to write lullabies, and like I was analyzing the text from a lot of those lullabies while I was working there. And I think it's like really cathartic for them too, because they get to write not just about like happy things that they want their baby to hear, but it's also like a kind of release for them because they write about like how sad they were to have their baby taken from them, because after a certain time the babies can't be with the moms in the prison anymore. Yeah.
Wow.
So it's like really uniquely sad and stressful, and this provides them with a way to not only like give their voice to their children so the children can hear them like on the recording, but also like I think the act of like actually writing a lullaby is uniquely cathartic too.
Wow.
And babies can't understand like the text, so
Right.
it's like a safe space within which to like release those emotions.
That's really, really, really cool that you did that. Is there a structure to a lullaby that most abide by?
No, in general, they have kind of like a unique vocal quality that you use when you're singing them, which is kind of like airy and light.
Mm-hmm.
They have like a lot of descending melodic contours and a slow tempo, which makes sense. They usually like are multimodal too, so you're rocking the baby while you sing them. It's not just that you're singing to them.
Mm-hmm.
And studies have shown that the rocking is like really important too in how lullabies can regulate like infant stress.
Wow.
So without the rocking, it might not be as effective. Yeah, and then having them sung by the mother's voice is also like a great way to build attachment bonds with your child because they learn to recognize your voice.
Wow, so many reasons.
Yeah.
to make lullabies. That's really cool. So how is the research going? Do you require participants for this kind of research?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
So I'm trying to recruit about 8 mothers, and I have recorded 2 so far, and I'm doing this until June, so I have some time. But yeah, it's a little bit difficult because the mothers that I'm studying have to have infants between 2 and 8 months old, because until you're 2 months old, infants can't really be active participants in vocal exchanges. Like, they're taking a lot in, but they can't produce that many sounds. But then we don't want the age range to be too big because then the infants are in totally different developmental stages. So the results won't really be comparable. Because part of my study looks at how they interact with their mothers.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll get to that later.
Yeah.
But, so 2 to 8 months is a narrow range and also like really early in life. So women who have infants that age are probably really overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And busy taking care of them. So it's hard to, reach subjects.
Yeah, I guess you don't stumble upon women who have a child that is specifically 2 to 8 months old around the corner every day.
Although every time I see someone like with a stroller around Cambridge, I kind of like reach for my flyers. And I haven't done it yet because I'm a little like nervous about doing that. But I really just want to like hand out flyers to every stroller I see. Every person with a stroller.
You're never going to look at babies the same again. You're only going to see them as either 2 to 8 months old or useless.
It's like conditioned response.
Okay, so with these studies, what are you actually measuring as your outcome?
So I can tell you a little bit about that, but I can't tell you too much because it's like still in progress.
Fair.
But I'm measuring heart rate, and heart rate variability is one of my major outcome variables because that's like a physiological response that can be modulated and can be measured in real time. So that's like one of the unique contributions of my work is that you get real-time physiological measurements. But other people have shown that there's effects of singing on like salivary cortisol and cytokines and all kinds of other interesting molecules. But since I'm working in like a limited time frame, I don't have time to like go back 2 hours later to get their cortisol measurement because there's lag for those things. Yeah, so we'll get real-time measurements. They're also filling out several psychological questionnaires, so we get baseline mental well-being and measures like that. And I'm doing audio analysis on their interactions with their infants, both before and after the singing happens. So, like, can singing have a meaningful effect on the ways in which they respond to their child and the child responds to them?
And how do you measure something like that? Like, what can you take away from a conversation between a mother and the child?
There's like several features that all fall under this blanket term called interactional synchrony, and that involves like expressive timing, which is like the timing between turns, and also some like pitch related aspects, like whether the contour of the mother's voice matches or goes against the contour of the infant's response, and whether she adapts to those changes.
Wow.
Yeah.
So interesting. So how much can babies really convey about their emotional state from saying things or...
I think it's hard to say from just saying things because I can also watch them and anticipate whether they're going to like cry or not based on their facial expressions.
Right.
I think the mothers obviously can too. But it's crazy how many times a baby can look like it's going to cry during a session and the mother can, like, do something to, like, change that. And then the baby will start, like, laughing. Their emotional states are so variable. So, yeah, they can convey in real time whether they're going to cry. And the mother can respond really quickly in an effective way.
Wow, mothers are so
amazing.
Magical in that respect. Yeah. What are you taking out, taking away from this project about family or mothers, like beyond the actual science of it? Like, are you learning anything?
You just have to be so flexible and on your feet, on your toes all the time, kind of like responding to your infant's needs, and that must be so exhausting. But so many of the women that I've met are also like simultaneously doing like PhDs or like working in Cambridge, and it's just like amazing how much more they can get done than me in a day.
You're like living multiple lives at that point. Like quite literally.
Yeah.
You are responsible for the survival of this.
Yeah.
I can't imagine. That's
Me
really crazy. So do you have way more respect for your own mother now?
Yeah,
that you know
I've also,
like...
one of the best parts of my course is that I get to take classes from different disciplines. So I'm taking this sociology course that talks a lot about motherhood, and I've been reading a lot about it this week, and I started feeling really homesick. And at first I couldn't tell like why I was homesick. Like, do I really miss New Jersey that much? But I realized it's not that I miss New Jersey, it's that I miss my mom, because I've been reading about motherhood so much. And here they celebrate Mother's Day like on March 31st, so it's not in May like in America. But yeah, so I've been seeing like lots of stuff for that too, and I just like keep thinking about my mom, and I'm such a weenie. I just like was reading about like, you know, all the social burdens of motherhood and how like so many forces can like impact the stresses of motherhood. Just like mad respect for my mom.
Did she sing to you when you were a baby?
Yeah, all the time. Mm-hmm.
Did that inspire this project to any degree, or did you kind of come across it via a different angle?
I think that like reading about all the stuff, so I was doing lit review for the Lullaby project, and reading about all of the research that I did made me like really thankful that my mom sang to me when I was little.
Definitely. Right. That's amazing. Is your mother a singer as well?
Yeah, I think everyone in my family is pretty musical, but they didn't. I think my mom took classes when she was little.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
So now you're doing kind of like the intersection of everything that has been important to you in your life so far.
Yeah.
Music, science, family.
Yeah.
Very cool. And so your degree is just 1 year, correct? Mm-hmm. Okay, so you're done in the summer.
Yeah. So I leave on July 22nd.
Wow, crazy. Yeah. That's sooner than
I know.
I actually thought. And plans after Cambridge?
So I'm actually going to medical school, because, you know, in the U.S. everything's graduate medicine. I don't know why I'm explaining that to you, but I'm so used to explaining that to people here because they're like all undergraduate medicine. But yeah, so I applied to med school last year, and then I deferred my acceptance so I could come here, and I'm going to start like 2 weeks after I leave here. Yeah, but I'm really excited for that.
You can do it. I trust you.
Yeah.
That'll be so great. And where are you studying?
At Washington University in St. Louis.
Okay. Very cool.
Yeah.
It's a very good school, in case it's not known. It's super impressive. And with med school, do you focus on anything? Is it like kind of a research degree like this, or are you just taking classes and everything?
Well, the first 2 years are like a class overload, kind of. They're called the preclinical years. Okay. And you do like volunteer clinics and like do some patient-related work during that time too. I'll probably be doing like a lot of research. And then years 3 and 4 are like all clinical rotations, so you rotate through lots of different specialties so you can figure out what you want to apply for your residency.
Cool. And do you have any insights as to what you want to do, or is this like way early?
I have like 2 major paths that I'm looking at. So one is like pediatric neurosurgery, which is what I always thought I would do. But then something else that I've been reading a lot about recently is like a nerve transplant surgery that originated at WashU that is part of like, it's a subspecialty of plastic surgery where they can actually like transplant neural stem cells and regrow nerves that are damaged in like trauma, or like restore like spinal cord damage.
Wow.
Yeah.
Very cool. So you just stumbled upon that, and
I was just like trying to figure out what I wanted to do at WashU, and they have like some of the most NIH funding in the world. So in America, obviously, at their age. But I wanted to like work in a cool lab because I'm sure that like a lot of the labs there have really interesting work going on because of that funding. And this is like probably the coolest that I've found. Yeah.
So do you plan on incorporating any of the research you're doing this year into med school?
Yes. So I actually talked to the administrators there about like starting a NICU music program there's like several hospitals that the med school is affiliated with.
Mm-hmm.
I think I will probably roll it out while I'm there. I think that would be doable now that I like know way more about what it takes to like actually work with mothers.
Definitely.
Yeah. I feel like I'm always on call here too because my subjects have to like let me know when their baby's awake. Yesterday I had like a 3-hour like call window where she could text me at any time and be like, "Come now," and the baby just kept falling asleep.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Wow.
Have to be adaptable.
Have to be adaptable.
Yeah.
Sounds like you're learning a lot about almost everything this year, which is great.
And about being a real person too, and like about not living in New Jersey where I've lived my whole life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very exciting.
Very exciting. Okay, so to wrap up, overall abroad experience has been positive.
Yes.
Yes, very
Definitely.
positive.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. You enjoyed your time at Cambridge doing this master's.
Yes.
Okay, cool. Glad.
Highly recommend.
That's great. Well, your research is so interesting. Your background is so interesting. Thank you so much for talking with
thanks
me
for having
about this.
me.
This was like so fun.
Fun for me too.